Mrs. Senbore, what do you think? What do you think businesses can actually do? I mean, what legal options are there for them to explore? I mean, thinking about it, is it possible to possibly consider filing for some tax break or holidays, or should they just go talking to their banks about restructuring of their loans, which could go delinquent if care is not taken? What are the legal options available to businesses, Mrs. Senbore?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And the question you ask is very relevant at a time like this. I think before I speak specifically to what businesses can do, I'd like to first of all touch on what businesses should expect as a fallout of the pandemic itself in relation to their businesses. And this would, I mean, it's been touched on by the other panelists in some aspects, but as a legal consultant, I think we also need to look at this from the standpoint of contractual obligations that we have as businesses. So for instance, the pandemic, based on its impact on businesses, has brought about a reduction in productivity and revenue due to the social distancing rules and lockdown orders. So businesses are unable to open their doors, or even the ones that are able to, the number of clients or customers they're servicing have reduced because everyone is working from home and we're now adjusting to the new normal. In certain instances, employees are falling sick and those hours that they can put to work are being reduced. Some offices have had to keep their staff away in states where there is no lockdown order because you want to avoid an instance where there is one employee who falls ill and thus spreads the virus amongst the remainder of the staff. You also have the exposure to off-taker defaults, particularly for certain industries that are heavily impacted: hospitality, aviation, even the oil and gas sector, as well as the financial services sector. So the fact that you as a business are exposed to third-party defaults, whether as your off-taker because of your inability to deliver, or your off-taker being unable to take off the goods that they have signed off or services they've signed off from you, or you not being able to receive raw materials from your suppliers, these are real challenges that businesses are going to face. There is also the exposure to liabilities, whether regulatory or compliance or contractual liabilities. So in addressing this, I'd like to look at what businesses need to do, not just from the governmental side, because government won't put in place palliatives. They've been trying to put in place palliatives. Agencies have announced extensions in relation to regulatory filings for taxes for listed companies. The SEC and the NSE have extended the timelines for filings. FRS has also done that. But is that enough to help businesses navigate this period? I think the major risk will be that of contractual defaults and liabilities that could emanate from this. And the overall picture that businesses need to consider is that these liabilities, if not properly handled, can overwhelm the business and lead them down the path to insolvency. So what can businesses do to mitigate these challenges that are likely to be a fallout of the pandemic? The first thing that businesses need to do is to carry out a review of all contractual relationships with immediate effect. Now, what this does is to allow businesses to identify what rights exist in those relationships that can be explored in order to mitigate undue liabilities or exposures to risk. Once a review is done, you are able to isolate high impact and high risk relationships, and you then work your way towards navigating those risks. This would include, for suppliers, you begin to immediately source for alternative suppliers. Begin to look for alternative raw materials, alternative suppliers that you need to explore and build relationships with. Everyone is going to look for new relationships at a time like this, and the earlier businesses start that, the better. For off-take risk, you need to also look for new vendors. You need to diversify. Mr. Truman mentioned that we're in a new age, digitization, a new way of offering your business, your services to your off-takers, to your clients, begins to be paramount as a decision for business owners and managers at a time like this. The world will never go back to brick and mortar as we used to know it. Things have changed effectively. And any business that is unable to respond to the new way is going to fall off and die if we're not nimble enough to be able to adapt to the changing way of living life that we're all going to experience post the pandemic. So seeking alternative sources of raw material supplies, as well as alternative sources of delivering your service and goods, as well as off-takers, is a key way to ensure that revenues are maintained. Also, where businesses note that they are unable to meet obligations due to the challenges they are facing, it's important. This could be loan obligations based on loans that have been obtained or debt instruments that have been issued. It's important that this is communicated immediately to the counterparties. In the case of debt instruments, if you've issued debt instruments such as bonds, you need to immediately notify your trustee and see whether in your documentation there is any clause that you can trigger. A material adverse change clause will typically be there in loan documentation as well as the debt instruments that you've issued.
Okay,
but
thank
you
you.
Don't want to default.
Yeah.
So just to respond to the particular question you mentioned in relation to what can they do in relation to loans?
Yes.
Asking for a moratorium, that is the way for banks, for businesses to go. Initiate the conversation with your lenders before they come to you. Thank you.